You are listening to the Susan Brender podcast, and I am Susan Brender. I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender podcast. Today my guest is Gramps Jeffrey. Now that's his pen name. His real name is Mark Joseph. And you know, an interesting thing about him is he is a writer, and he's written a few books that have really gotten great reviews. And the first book that he's written is called The Secrets of Retailing, How to Beat Walmart. And it was written to help entrepreneurs and small businesses compete against the big guys. Now he's written another book about a small little child, and that the book is known as Number 3. I called it Number 3, Gramps. Give me the real name.
The real name of this book is I Don't Want to Turn 3. And it's about, obviously, a 2-year-old ready to turn 3.
Now, there are many reasons that people write books, but I want to understand, and I want our audience to understand why you wrote this particular book, because we're living in a really strange time now. And, you know, for 3-year-olds, I mean, there's even a suggestion that masks have to be worn by small children. Now, that is really a tragedy and really devastating to children. But let's talk a little bit about the book. What inspired you to write the book?
Well, interesting you talk about masks because, you know, living this past year because of the pandemic caused by the COVID-19, you know, in isolation, except, you know, being able to be with family, you know, gave me a special time to watch and interact with my grandkids. I got to tell you, what a trip that was. You know, all 6 of these kids, I've got 6 grandkids, and they're completely different personalities. You know, but the one thing they do have in common is their sense of curiosity and how excited they get when they do accomplish something. You know, watching them grow year to year and how they intend to interact and be with each other, you know, is really the basis for this book. You know, what goes through a toddler's mind, the parents are so desperate to understand. You know, when does a toddler understand the difference between me and us? You know, this book explores how a family finds all this out together, Susan.
Yeah, you know something, it's very interesting because I also have a 3-year-old, and I understand, and I've watched him grow. And as I watch him grow, what I realize is his curiosity. He happens to love cars. There's something about a car that makes my little, I call him Munchkin, so excited. And when you bring him to a museum, people would never think that a 3-year-old would be interested, but he is. That's one of the most interesting things, that even a 3-year-old has a tremendous curiosity about things. Now, you have 6 grandchildren. I want to understand, when you started being a grandfather, how did it feel to be a grandfather?
Well, you know, as a baby boomer, trying to understand how the world has evolved since I was 3 years old, you know, is really, really part of the story also. You know, my parents didn't have any cell phones. They didn't have any internet. They didn't have cable TV. They didn't have a remote. I was my dad's remote. He said, go change the channel. I get up and change the channel. So I was the remote back then. But, you know, and my parents' definition of discipline is really quite different than the parents of today. And I think today's parents are much better. You know, has today's world made a better place for these 3-year-olds to grow up in with all this technology and so forth? You know, I'll kind of let your listeners answer that question, you know, as they kind of think about how they were treated when they were growing up compared to how we treat our kids today. So, you know, it goes back to, you know, why did I write this book? I wrote it really for the grandkids. You know, their interaction has been really invaluable to me. You know, as you watch them understand Jordan. Jordan is the 2-year-old is turning 3 years old, so he's the star of the book. You know, with how he discovers right versus wrong. You know, you can see that the older kids have gone through this. They had the same dilemma when they were his age, and the younger kids don't really quite understand the whole concept of sharing. You know, so this whole experience for me has been priceless. And, you know, going back to your 3-year-old, does he also like dinosaurs?
Well, the interesting thing about my 3-year-old, first of all, I want you to know his name is Jordan, which is really a coincidence.
What a coincidence. He's the star of my book.
There you go. He is a star. I consider him the most incredible star, but that's really not the issue. The issue is you asked me if he likes dinosaurs. Now, for some reason, my son is a broadcaster for all kinds of teams. He's on Sirius XM. And the interesting thing is that he teaches my grandson every game there is, like baseball, basketball, hockey. And the cutest thing that you've ever seen is that Jordan, my grandson, my 3-year-old, he goes over to his toy chest, he takes a helmet, and he picks up a bat, and he hits that ball, and he runs the bases in his house. It is so amazing. Now, you talked about dinosaurs. You know, interestingly enough, when I was young, and I'm sure the same thing with you, when we were young, we used to be taken to museums to see dinosaurs, and it was fascinating. Now, your grandchildren, I mean, you're talking about dinosaurs. What about your grandchildren? How do they feel about that?
Well, it really is interesting that all 6 of my grandchildren are into dinosaurs. I can't tell you why. It could be because of television they watch. It could be what they hear from their parents. But what's so crazy about it, when they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, they can name all the dinosaurs. They can tell me what this one does, and if this one, eats meat, or this one eats plants. And as far as I'm concerned, there's a small, medium, big-sized dinosaur. They go into details of all this. So it happens to be something that we found that for some reason, and their friends do it too, they all love these dinosaurs. So, in this year of isolation that we had to go through, where we really couldn't see our kids. I mean, I've got 2 here with me in Scottsdale, Arizona, 2 in Austin, Texas, and 2 in Orlando. And, we really saw them for a few weeks at a time. So the question was, how do we keep in contact with all these little kids to remember who their grandparents are? We can't see them because of the COVID-19 issue. And so, interestingly enough, because of this dinosaur thing we were just talking about, and we found they love dinosaurs, we decided that every night in our house, we've got half a dozen little dinosaurs here, which they always came to play with, and we would put them in a different position in the house. So, for instance, one night they were in the refrigerator eating blueberries. Another night they were helping the grandmother wash the dishes. They had, soap on their noses. Another night they were playing the piano. Another night they walked up the stairs. Anyway, when it all came about, we had over 50 different places that the dinosaurs had been in our house. So what evolved with my kids in Austin and my grandkids in Orlando is they would start to call us every night to find out where the dinosaurs were. So they would, they call my wife, who's got the iPhone, and the FaceTime, and she would pick up the phone and say hello, and they say, "Where's Gramps? Where's Gramps? We want to find out where the dinosaurs are tonight." So in our little way, the dinosaurs brought our whole family together because every night these little 2, 3, and 4-year-olds were calling us and wanted to see where they were tonight, and we would show them, and they would do something different. So, one of the things, the hardest things, I'm sure you've found this out also as grandparents, is to keep in touch when they're not down the street. And in today's world, most families are not down the street like they were when we were growing up. And so I just encourage any of your listeners to come up with a way that really, gets to these kids and to make them want to reach out to you, so you're not always reaching out to them. In your case, if they're into sports, do some sports stuff. That'd be a lot of fun, I would think.
Yes. Something absolutely, Jordan absolutely loves sports. There's no question about him. My son, all over his house, has posters and all kinds of pictures of people whom he's interviewed. And Jordan, if you go into his room, it's really a laugh because all over the walls, all you see are sports people. Now, here's the thing I wanted to know. We have little kids that we're dealing with, and today everything is digital. And the funny thing about that, Gramps, is that another thing that Jordan does is that he gets on a little iPad. It's an iPad for kids. And what he does is watch all kinds of cartoons, and he presses all buttons. I can't even do that. He knows everything about it, which is so interesting. Now that brings to mind the question. The question is, today, because of the digital world that we're living in, do you think kids are going to be smarter?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that this newest generation is much smarter than the baby boomers were. And I even think, I won't tell my kids this, but I think they're smarter than they are. Just because, they're exposed so early to these digital and how to play the games that, I can't tell you many times my wife and I have asked one of the kids how to get onto our iPhone or something like that. It's all part of their natural. Now, we as adults got to make sure that they don't spend the entire day on these devices. But it really helps to use these devices. I was just thinking, I got a phone call yesterday from my grandson Jackson, who is now 4. And you were talking about sports, and he just finished his first year in T-ball, and he loved it. So he couldn't wait to call us and show us this trophy he got. It's got his little name. It's got a name in the trophy, Jackson. It's got a picture of a T-ball guy. And he was so excited about that. So yeah, whatever it takes to get these kids excited to call you, to interact with you, we've got to encourage that.
Yeah. Today, things are very serious, Gramps. All these different things are happening all around the world. And of course, it's really a situation where adults have to deal with a lot. And they have to deal with politics. Politics has become the most important thing that's going on today. Everything involves politics. Now, I know your grandchildren are only 3 years old, 4 years old, but how do you feel about that fact that the government, and I'm sorry I'm becoming political, but I need to do that, and I need to ask you, how do you feel about your grandsons or granddaughters, if you have them, having to take shots?
They are very encouraged to do that. Okay. In other words, my oldest she just turned 9 years old, and because when they come over, we watch the news. We watch the national news. We try to a little bit. Sometimes they're interested in it when there's a big fire and so forth. They're looking at it, but they also, whenever they see kids on there, they react to it too. And she said to me, she says, I can't wait to get my shot. She says, I had to stay home from school last week because someone in our class got COVID. She said, and I couldn't go to learn. When you're 9 years old, I guess you like to learn. And so she says, I can't wait to get my shot so that I don't have to do this again. I don't want to miss school. And so I'm all for it. I think, especially with these kids, and again, kids reflect what their parents say and do. If their parents didn't want them to get the shot, their kids don't want them to get the shot. But it happens in our family, all the parents are encouraging their kids. This is the way to do it to protect not only yourself, but protect everyone else. This is also a way so you can go see grandma and grandpa, sooner, because if we're all shot up and we're all good, then life goes on. So as far as I am concerned and my family is concerned, they just want life to go on. So this is part of it.
Yeah, I think that's really a good message to send to people. A lot of people disagree with you, needless to say, and of course it should be everybody's choice. That is what I feel. But I agree with you from the standpoint that what does it matter? I mean, we may not know what happens for a long time, but on the other hand, right now we're dealing with a crisis. And when you're dealing with that, remember, years ago, we took the polio shot. We took, when we were born, we had to take a diphtheria and all of these other shots, and nobody complained. They said, this is going to make us better, and it's very important. Now, I'm going to move on with this. This may be a surprising thing to you, but many years ago, I interviewed Heather Henson. Now, you know who the Henson family are, don't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And, Heather showed puppets and did a demonstration of how puppets make a difference in children's lives. Now, Sesame Street has been available to children all over the world for years, absolutely years. And there was always a message in every show that, was on TV. And one of the great things is the message were always positive. Now, I think today that a lot of the messages that children get when they, listen to certain shows are not that positive. What was it about? And I'm just curious what you think about this. What was about Sesame Street that made it as popular as it was?
I think we need to go back just a little bit further. And you had mentioned that all of us took our polio shots in our diphtheria, and there was no question. We just went in and we did it. And the reason we did that was, don't forget, our parents had just finished up World War II. They are the greatest generation. I don't care what anybody says about any other generation. Our parents' generation, for what they went through and how they had survival of democracy, they are the greatest generation. But in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, this greatest generation were raising their kids, and they saw what bad things happen. They saw, they saw it firsthand, and they knew that we as a country, in order to grow and survive and become the greatest country, had to stick together and do what was right. So I think we need to go all the way back to that generation and how they were so disciplined and how they had us, without question. There wasn't any question whether we were going to get our shots. So we just got them because they knew that it was the best thing for this country. So I think all the Sesame Streets and the Henson puppets and all that, they're a product of what was taught by our parents. And so we, as baby boomers, need to carry on that same message because it was the correct message. That was a booming time for this country. That really is what made this country is what it is today. And so we just got to keep that tradition going and do that. And yes, there's a lot of things on the internet and on television that aren't very positive. But again, if you take a look, if you watch what most of your kids are watching today, there's still these positive shows. They sing along with them. So there's plenty of positive shows out there, I think, that will help make this newest generation the smartest one.
You just mentioned music, and from my standpoint, music was always part of my life. Since I was a kid, I remember, this might sound strange, but I was like sort of weird because I loved Broadway music. And one of the things that I did was I joined a particular comedy club and another club where they were teaching actors how to be actors. And there were children there. And you had to see what kind of work these children did. I mean, they were little kids that could memorize almost anything. So I bring this up because music is the most important thing for many of us, and including little kids. But listen to the music that we hear today. Hip-hop, rap, other things. And the message that they get from that music is absolutely disgusting. Now, I use that word disgusting because it really is. So when the kids come to your house, when you have all your grandchildren, do you play music and do you sing along and do you, just love being together and basically listen to what the music has to say?
You need to meet my wife because she is very similar to you. She sings everything. When there's an issue, she sings a song. She listens to all the Broadway shows like you do. And so that's kind of reflected in our house. We're listening to the 60s and 70s and sometimes the 50s. When the kids come over, that's the music they hear. And that's the music that their parents heard. And so they get to weigh that music along with whatever they hear outside of when they see us. So I think that's part of the tradition that grandparents hold on to is, the music of the 60s, they were fantastic. And
Oh, yeah.
we share that. We share that with our grandkids. I think a lot of grandparents do that. Whether they admit it or not, I don't know, but I think they do. And I think that again helps round out these little kids so that the interesting thing, it's necessary to teach children how to think, but not exactly what to think. Okay, so we as the baby boomer generation need to make sure we're helping our children to think things through. So we present them with the music of the 60s and the 70s, but let them really figure out what is right and what is wrong. And I think if grandparents and parents continue to just be positive and give them that direction, these kids will turn out to be okay.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great message. If you give your grandchildren a lot of information and a lot of education and talk to them, spend time with them, listen to music together, do all the things that you were talking about, you got to turn out somebody who's great. Now let's talk about one more thing. You wrote this book, and I want you to tell people a little bit, and I don't know if you have the book at hand, but could you just remember one little passage in the book that you want people to hear?
That's an interesting question. And we're talking about how do you influence kids. And, we're talking about my book, but there's hundreds of great children's books out there. And so it's important for us to take the time, much like we're saying, let's teach them how to listen to music. They get to pick what kind of music they want to listen to, but let's teach them how to do that. And so it's very important that we go ahead and teach our children how to read books. When you think about it, why is it important for us as adults to especially grandparents, to the benefits of reading to children? Well, number one, it's a great time for us to bond with our children. It's by having a book or have them pick a book out, and they can see what it is. It gives us a chance to spend some real quality time away from the iPhones, away from the computers, away from the noise, to really bond with our kids. So I encourage your listeners, take the time to pick out a book and read to your kids. So, that's one reason why we need to make sure we read to kids. Another reason, and this is one that's probably one of the things that took me a while to learn, but, supporting how to do listening skills. So many of us don't really learn how to listen. So if we can teach our kids the listening skills, because they got to listen to when they read a book, or hear a book. So it's important for us to really truly take the time and teach them these listening skills. And so I think that's another reason why, as we're talking about what do we have to do to train our kids, take time to read them a book so that it helps them with listening skills. It helps them with, the cognitive and the language development. It helps them learn different words and what the meanings of words are, and so forth. And then, so that's important. Then obviously, you want to make sure these little kids have an attention span. So a book helps them, whether it's for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, it helps them create a whole concentration and self-discipline so they can have this attention span that you're spending together. So we were talking about how music helps. I want to talk about how reading helps. Okay, you want me to read a page from the book? Is that what you asked?
I would like that very much.
Okay, so this is about halfway through the book. Then all of a sudden, Olivia screams, "What are my dancing shoes doing in Jordan's room?" The entire family runs to my private bedroom, and Jackson yells, "My dinosaurs!" And Levi shrieks, "My sea creatures!" And Baker bawls, "Truck!" And Grace cries, "My dolls!" And Mommy looks at me like today will be my last day alive.
Wow, that's very powerful. I have to tell you, Gramps, very powerful. So here's what I would like you to do. I'd like you to tell our audience how they get your book, where they get your book, and how they can get in touch with you. Because you know and you have experienced what it's like to be a grandfather to a lot of children, and you really understand the needs and the necessity for everybody to be involved with one another. So I want to thank you for being on the Susan Brender podcast, but first, tell everybody how they get in touch with you.
Sure, no problem. The name of the book is I Don't Want to Turn 3, with the letter number 3. I Don't Want to Turn 3. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, about 100 other sites on the internet that carries the book. Or you can find it on my site, Gramps Jeffrey, JEFFREY.com, or I Don't Want to Turn 3.com. And please, feel free to email me, grampsjeffrey@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to anyone about their grandkids and what we can do to really encourage and help them grow. So it's grampsjeffrey@gmail.com.
Well, Gramps Jeffrey has been the guest on the Susan Brender podcast, and always, I want to say this always, because we've had conversations before, it is a pleasure to listen to you and to realize that there's hope, that our grandchildren are going to grow up being smart, being happy, and all of the things that we wish them to have. So with that said, thank you again, Gramps, for being on the Susan Brender podcast.
Thank you so much, Susan. I enjoyed it.